Hi there. It's July 23rd, and we continue our journey through the second book of Chronicles, and we are completing chapter 8. We're looking at chapter 9 and coming into chapter 10. Now, chapters 8 and 9 are really the rest of the story of Solomon. In chapter 8, we find that Solomon has put in place all of the orders of the temple and its worship, which David, his father, has ordered and has made space for. Particularly, we read that he's put in place the celebration of the great feasts, of the new moons, of the daily services, the sacrifice and the orders of the priests. And so it's very much putting in place the order which is going to continue throughout the centuries to come for the temple. It's interesting, at the beginning of our reading as well, it says that he brings up the daughter of Pharaoh who he's taken to wife, but he doesn't allow her to live in the city of David, because he says it's not right that someone unholy should live in the holy place. So it's really interesting that Solomon has taken on a wife who he considers to be unholy and unfit to be in the Lord's presence. Then in chapter 9 we find we read of the visit of the Malkat Sheva, the Queen of Sheba, the Queen of the South, who comes and she visits Solomon. We're not sure who exactly she is, where she's from exactly, but she's obviously a woman of great wealth, as a great kingdom of great power. We know that, for instance, in Ethiopia there were female rulers, and in other places, so we know that this woman has great power and authority. It's also clear that she has great wealth. She brings spices which are unheard of, and maybe it's in the spices that a lot of the wealth of Sheba, this southern kingdom, exists. But when she comes and she witnesses the wealth of Solomon and the wisdom of Solomon particularly, it says that she's blown away. It says there's no spirit left in her. And she says, the half of your wisdom has not been told me. I've not even been described half of the wisdom that I see that you have. And she brings Solomon great gifts, and she brings him gold and spices and all of these things. And obviously there's partly a treaty, there's partly a covenant being made between their nations, which is what the visits of kings and queens were about. We also get the impression of the vast wealth of Solomon. It says at one point that silver was like stones in his kingdom, and cedar was like ordinary trees. He has special wood brought, almug wood, of which he makes steps for the temple, and he makes musical instruments, and says the like of them has not been seen anywhere else. Solomon also establishes ports down in the south in Elat, and from there go out ships to bring in more imports. It's an international trading nation now, and Huram, king of Tyre, helps him. Tyre obviously was a seagoing nation, and so Huram helps Solomon to establish his maritime powers. And so we get the impression at the end of the reign of Solomon, and with his death at the end of chapter 9, of tremendous power. It says that Solomon reigns from the lands of the Philistines down to the Nile. He reigns over his own kingdom, plus he also is chief king over other kingdoms as well. And then at the end of chapter 9 he dies. Interestingly, the chronicler doesn't have the same accounts as there are in Kings of Solomon's being led away by pagan wives and his heart being turned against the Lord. This is very pro-Solomon, it's very pro-Judah in its account, and so this is the aspect, this is the view that the chronicler has. And then as we go on into chapter 10, with the accession of Rehoboam, his son, we see this story where Rehoboam it doesn't take the counsel of the elders of Israel. We don't know why. Perhaps he wants to make a new start. He wants to be different to his father. Rehoboam asks the elders of Israel how he should govern, and they say, well, if you serve the people, if you show love towards them, if you show care and concern towards them, they will be yours forever. But the younger men, his younger counselors, advise him to rule harshly and to be harsher than Solomon ever was, and to whip them with scorpions, terrible words to use. And as a result, the people turn and they follow a rebel called Jeroboam. And Jeroboam has actually been prophesied by a prophet called Ahiah the Shilonite that he will be king. And so 10 of the tribes desert Rehoboam and they follow Jeroboam. And this becomes the northern kingdom of Israel, and just the tribes of Judah and Benjamin are left to Rehoboam in the south. And it's the division of the kingdom. So it's tragic that after this amazing period of establishment of the kingdom, of the building of the temple, of the worship of God, Rehoboam manages to break this up by his selfishness and by his vanity. And it's such a lesson to us of how things can go with human politics and with human rule. It's key that we see from Solomon and David's reign the importance of keeping God in first place. God obviously says that it's his land. If we walk in his ways, we will see his blessing. If we choose not to walk in his ways, his blessing is withdrawn. We can't experience the blessing of God. We can't experience the full presence of God if we're not walking closer to him. Let's desire in our hearts wholeheartedly, like we see David and Solomon doing, to follow after the Lord. Have a very good July the 23rd.